guy who put me in touch with him was an Italian critic called Alberto Bizzotta, and he emailed me Abel's phone number, and at the bottom of the email he put, "Be careful, he bites." And I passed that warning on to other people.
I'm just me. I'm a guy who, this is my environment here. This is, 100 yards from my house, and I'm a quiet. I like the quiet. The silence of the woods. I walk down here every day when I'm not working, and I would prefer this than any, walking down Fifth Avenue or going downtown or uptown any day. I have been the DP on, let's see, how many now? I've been a DP on Driller Killer, Bad Lieutenant, Dangerous Game, The Addiction, The Funeral, Blackout, Subway Stories, New Rose Hotel, and Our Xmas. I think that there seems to be more of that, but I met Abe. I went to NYU. I just finished in 1977, and Abel was doing attempting to get his first one off the ground, which was Driller Killer.
I got there, and I remember thinking I was terribly inadequate at first. Like, I knew a lot of stuff, I had a lot of skills, but I didn't have a lot of movie experience. And I just felt like I had nothing to say at first, and nothing to add. And, as time would tell, it, became evident that he was so open to hearing what the other people in the room had to say, that he actually made it easy to communicate. A lot of people will say he's not easy to communicate with, and that's true. And when you can communicate with Abel, it just gets so quick and so short, and the ideas are like machine gun. And he made it so that it was okay to bring something in, say something, bring an idea to the table.
The place was about this big, okay? So it was a confined space, very little seating, and there's this guy sprawled over this bench, this look, and with his shades on, and with this really surly look on his face. I said to Barry, "You see that guy over there? I'd like to kick his ass." 2 days later, this guy who runs the place, Ted Gamillion, introduces me to this guy who I wanted to kick my ass. Well, I wanted to kick his ass, and it was Abel Ferrara. He says, "Hey, Tony, I want you to meet this guy. You guys are really be perfect for one another." And, and Abe and I, we went for a little stroll and talked. And I says, "Hey, man, we got to work together sometime,
He had made his way down to Rockland Community College in Suffern from I guess, Peekskill, and he had been a friend of my brother Frank's, who was a photographer in Nyack, right? So the introduction was made there, and he knew that I did music. I played piano, and I was basically a studio musician, and an arranger. So I had no experience working in film per se, right? And I was introduced to Abel as a filmmaker, and it was not really something that I was so much going after. It was more happenstance that it happened like that. So I ended up meeting, this crew that was working around Abel at the time, and this was before everybody had taken on new names. So Nicky St. John was Nicky Oliverio. I always knew him as Nicky Oliverio and still know him as Nicky Oliverio. And Doug Metro was Dougie Gervasi, which is still to me his name, and Mary Kane. And there were a couple of others. Frank was part of the crew at that point, and there's probably my brother Frank D'Elia. And there were probably a few other people. Jackie McIntyre was also one of the original team members. And I think that it was the crew was perceived more as a band. Abel and I would always talk about it as being the band, and Abel was the lead singer of the band, essentially, and the leader of the band, and the rest of us were players in the band.
He was a character, but he liked surrounding himself with other characters. And I remember this one time we were in Daly's, and it was we were looking at Daly's for a scene that was very complicated, involved a lot of cameras. Of course, it starts with the slate, and the clapper loader guy would be there with the slate, and it'd be like, camera A, Mark, and he'd back off, and then the second camera, you'd see like, camera B, Mark. And we get to the third camera, and it's like, there's nobody there with the slate. and the camera's just panning wildly, looking for the guy. And finally, like, you know, practically 180 degrees over, there's this guy in a yellow rain slicker. It's the second AC, and he's just got this big yellow rain hat because we had a rain machine. And he's like yelling, "Mark!" And I remember, it was like the worst mistake you can make as a second AC, but Abel's in the back of the screening room just going, "I love this guy, I love this guy." And it was like, for him, the guy was funny and entertaining and a character, you know, in his big yellow rain slicker with his, you know, his little fisherman's hat.
I had heard a little bit about Abel as a filmmaker, but I was working with John Avildsen. We were doing a film called Neighbors, and we only had time to view a couple of reels on the flatbed. And I remember just thinking how much energy and how much snap Ms. 45 had. And then shortly after that, John had a cocktail party. Madison Avenue, 89th Street, very upscale. And I just remember asking someone next to me, who is that guy in the corner wearing a leather jacket and sunglasses? And they said, "Oh, that's Abel Ferrara." And I've got to meet this guy. He's doing some very interesting work. And I think that's how I got drawn into it, you know, through the John Avildsen circle. And he came down to the set a couple times. And so that's how I met some of what was even then, this is 81, the inner circle that was already in place.
You know, we were hippies. We participated, we were anarchists, as to use Anthony's word, but like anything went. I don't know, I guess, you know, you had to be a part of that time. I mean, anything went in college. In college, there was demonstrations going on. I mean, it was Woodstock, free children. I mean, so things were, you felt that in a sense. And then this idea of our family, the film family, as a separate family from yourself, we're very much into not being traditionalist. I mean, most of us, no one married young and had kids young or anything like that. You know, that was very important.
I am Jay Julian, spelled Julien. I am a lawyer. I am a theatrical producer. I have produced films as well, one of which is Abel's. And I love the business.
The first one of Abel's films that I saw was The Driller Killer. And by the way, I was absolutely convinced that the title was not The Driller Killer. I imagined that had been retitled for video. I couldn't believe that a film that was this subtle had such a crude title as The Driller Killer. And for years I tried to find out what the correct title was. But of course it was The Driller Killer.
Driller Killer, we all lived in the loft. And the actress lived there, and the DP lived there.
I got news for you. I lived there for a short while too.
We all lived there. And the
Forgot
editor,
about that.
was Richard? The editor was the cook.
Not me.
No, not Anthony. This guy, he was an unbelievable cook. So we all lived there, and the DP had those bloody dogs, right? Those big dogs, and they would watch his camera equipment because I'm sure we didn't have insurance or anything. And the lights were, we'd show up at a location, and the lights were whatever the guy brought from the camera department that day, whatever he could get out. But we all lived there, and the actress, because she couldn't go anywhere because she might not come back.
There was not much money going around. And Abel had one of these, those spool tables. It's a big spool table in the loft, right? And I think it was still there until the very end. I think it was always there. And Abel was there, and he like, okay, well, Abel was like, okay, here's the deal with the money. And he took like a scrap of paper, and he wrote the number, and then he slid it across the table like this. And I looked at it, and this was the budget for the film. This was the first negotiation, and I was like, okay, it's like, I said, okay, I'll do it. It was like $250.
I mean, it was just sort of a very confused, interesting, really John Cassavetes on drugs sort of experience for all of us. the couple of incidents that I remember. Well, one was when Baby Day was hiding in the bathroom at 4 o'clock in the morning prior to shooting our dream sequence, which we were lit. And she was dressed in a diaper, and we had somebody else dressed in a bunny costume. And Baby Day refused to come out of the bathroom. Abe was begging her for hours. And finally, she burst out of the bathroom at 4 o'clock in the morning. It was on 18th Street. She burst out of the bathroom, ran down the stairs, Abe following her, and chased her with nothing but a diaper on across Union Square at 4:30 in the morning.
I was up in San Francisco with a girlfriend, and I saw that Assault on Precinct 13 was playing at this grindhouse on Market Street, right? Playing with it was this item called Driller Killer. So I said to V, Assault on Precinct 13, gotta see it. I've been wanting to see this for a long time. And there's this item, Driller Killer. Now, it sounds pretty awful, and if we don't like it, we'll walk out, you know, fully expecting to walk out on it. So I have to sit through Driller Killer first. Here I'm seeing this funky thing, and Tony Coca-Cola, and that buffalo, and the artist agent, and you know, and these people, you know, and the guy with the drill, and that bum in the alley, you know, and getting it through the forehead, you know, and I said I had no idea it was a comedy.
Abe called me for a meeting, and at that time I was also teaching a CETA course, and my ex-wife came into New York, and both of us went to see a screening of Apocalypse Now at the Ziegfeld. And it's kind of a personally disturbing film to me because Martin Sheen plays a guy who was in my unit, my real unit in Vietnam, when of course this was the Fantasy Factory making a movie. So it was disturbing. So we sat around, and we had a few martinis afterwards and went to Abe's, and three of us drank a bottle or two of Jim Beam, and we were talking about the next movie, which was Ms. 45. And Abe asked me to shoot it, and I said, yeah, sure, I'll do it for $1,000 a week. And he leaned across the table and he says, well, why don't I just buy you a fucking Mercedes? This led to a few words, and I ended up leaving, and we had an 8-year hiatus in our career together.
Now we flash forward, and I take Cinnamon to see Ms. 45. Cinnamon, obviously a redhead. And we go, and I see, I don't put two and two that the guy that made Driller Killer, I can't even remember the guy's name. I don't even know if there were credits on Driller Killer. I don't even know if I was there in time to see the credits. So then we see Ms. 45, right? Obviously a classic, okay? And I love this movie, right? And as we come out of the theater, Cinnamon turns to me and she says, I'd like to do that to you. So here's the funny part. I bump into another one of my girlfriends from that period, Margaret, and she said, she says, what have you been doing? And I said, oh, I've been working with this guy, Abel Ferrara. She says, you know, I'll tell you a funny story. After you saw Ms. 45, you said to me, I could really work with this guy. And I says, you know, that's funny because I worked on every single film after that.
It was basically the same thing. You know, looked at the film, sat down at the spool table, and when it got time to talk about money, because now a couple of years had passed by, and Abel had like come up a little bit in the world, right? And he did exactly the same thing. He wrote the number down on the piece of paper, and he slid it across, and it was like I just looked at it and I was like, oh shit, you know. I mean, it's it's another gig for no money. It's like, you know, I'm making some money here in the studio. I was just shaking my head. He said that's it, and he said, in fact, we have to take. It was $1,500. He said we have to take $900 and buy a VCR, which had just come out. It was like 1978 or 79 or something, and they weren't commercially out. People didn't have them in their homes, so they were really expensive. They were like between $800 and $900. So the budget for the music was $1,500, and we were going to spend 900 on the VCR so that we wouldn't have to sit at the Steenbeck and do it that way. We could go up to my little studio and score this thing, right? I was just like, forget it. I said, I got to think about this, right? So I went back and I started thinking about it. I called Frank up, who at this point was not so much involved with making Abel's films, right? I said, look, Abel is like offering me this deal. It's like, no money again. I'm going to be working for 3 months. And he said, well, what did you do? I said, well, I told him I was going to go home and think about it, I basically was like walking on it. Frank was like, you get in your fucking car, go down there and tell Abel you want the gig, that you're taking the gig. And this was a couple of days later now, so it's like maybe I had blown the gig with Abel. And sure enough, I went down there and there was another keyboard, somebody else's keyboard was set up there. And I was, on very, very thin ice as far as the gig went. I just took Abel aside. As soon as I saw that setup, right? I said, what's going on? He said, well, this guy came in and he played a couple of things. And I said, Abel, I'm taking the gig. And he said, well, what are we going to do with this guy? And I said, look, he could fetch me coffee at the fucking recording sessions, exactly like that. And Abel was like, that really talked to Abel. I think he really respected me. I think we kind of really hit it off at that moment. And he said, okay, and that was it.
Fierce City is all about Abel's relationship with his writer, Nick St. John. Tom Berenger is essentially playing Abel, and Jack Scalia is playing Nick. His character is actually called Nicky. And these two characters run an agency which provides strippers to New York clubs. And as I see it, this agency is a metaphor for Abel's cinema.
I was supposed to come in and just cut the fight scene at the end of Fierce City. This confrontation between Tom Berenger and the serial killer in Fierce City. And I says, okay, well, let's take a look at reel one. So I recut the whole show, and I'm trying to remember how fast I cut it. It was very fast. I may have recut the whole show in a week, saving the final confrontation in the alleyway, which was what I was originally brought in to do. And I cut that, and I cut that in a very brutal fashion.
This guy was like, went to the wall for me with big shots to get me the gig, and sold them on the fact that I was talented enough to do this, right? And that says a lot about Abel and this guy who has a big heart and loyalty, right? But Fierce City, he couldn't push it through. So what happened was I ended up getting the songwriting gig. So we did like 6 or 8 songs, and I brought this guy David Johansen in, and we wrote a bunch of songs with him, and I think Abel and I wrote songs together on it. And Dick Halligan ended up scoring the film.
The first day I was there, it must have been what they called a Chem Junior, which was only 2 plates and a viewing screen, not a 4-plate, and a moviola, okay? Because I remember rolling down a roll of trims into a bin, and the picture had all been attached together using white sound tape. I turned to these guys and I said, okay, who did this? And there they are, they're quivering, Abel and Nicky. I said, this will never happen again. I says, I'll cut the show. If you want something done, you tell me and I'll do it. But now I know why this guy quit. You fuckers were cutting behind his back at night, and that's what they were doing. After that film, he was less and less involved in the editorial process. We would get, I'd go over to the place with a video output of something I'd done, and we would discuss it at his place. We'd have a little macaroni, a little red wine, and we would discuss it, And I would make changes accordingly, But he didn't want to hover, That was the only time he hovered was on Fierce City, because hey, he didn't know me. I was an unknown quantity.
And then Abel started working in American television, and he did episodes of Miami Vice, which were not particularly good. And he did a pilot for Crime Story, which was actually very good. But he seemed to be one of those directors who had maybe done some interesting work early in his career, but now was going to vanish into the world of television. And then Abel started moving back into theatrical features, and he made China Girl.
China Girl was incredible. Everything about it. I mean, I'd go on location. It was all around town. I'd go visit the location. The knife fight in that funky little alley, and Randy, you were there. Remember? Get him! What was it? Whatever Russell Wong's name was. Get him!
Put him down.
Yeah. It was fabulous. Okay. I mean, but everybody was so beautiful in that film. I mean, all these good-looking Chinese guys, and like Dave Caruso and Knucklehead Russo and Rockin' Paul G. Hip. We had a cast in them in that one too.
Then King of New York came out, and you could see that he was back to doing the kind of things that he was born to do.
So what I like about Abe is that Abe, once I asked him to actually block Chris Walken from going from point A to point B, turned to me and he went, "Hey, Kenny, you can't ask an actor like Chris Walken to walk like that." I said, "Well, why not?" He said, it's my choice to let the actor make the choice. So, okay, great. And so what it taught me a lot of times is can't trap these actors in light.
Let's say when Abel's on a certain track with the actors. Like I've seen it happen between he and Chris Walken, where they are just communicating. They are just seeing what the other one sees, and they just know where they're going. And it'll be like click, 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 click all day long. And then there'll be days where, say, I don't know, any given day player, actor or something just didn't get on board, didn't comprehend where he was going, and he can be extremely frustrated, and vent that frustration and be like that on set. So it's really, it really depends on what's happening that day, who's in the room, who's responding, who's on board, you know what I mean, and how all that's going.
What I want to make clear about this is that they were drawn to not only Abel but Christopher Walken. They wanted to work with him. They wanted to be in that scene with him, and so Abel helped me cast that, but we had a draw. There was an allure to that picture, and that really made the whole casting process easier.
I have a memory of building a practical shower. I think it was scene 1 where he's in a shower. And we built that shower actually on the roof of a building as a set, I think, and it wasn't having anything, it shot as if the Plaza Hotel suite. But it was another location. It was a set that was built to make this, make the schedule happen. So there were always these partials, because of course that's part of the puzzle, is to make the day. I mean, if we're going to be shooting on Avenue B and 3rd Street, and also have to have a scene fit in that day that takes place in the bathroom of the Plaza Hotel suite, well, we can't just run all the way uptown in the same day and make that happen. So there are a lot of little partials just to make the puzzle come together.
That was always the thing with Abel. If you wrote something, he was always like, I'm gonna have to look at this fucking film in 20 years from now, and I'm gonna, if I hate that song, I'm still gonna hate it, 20 years from now. So, he didn't want anything in his film that he didn't like. And
I don't think that Christopher Walken was partial to big dialogue speeches, because in a way, it was like a lot of lines to remember, a lot of opportunities to kind of trip up, and it just seemed like, and he had a pretty elaborate cue card system going. But what I would have to say is that the moments when he was trying to remember his line were often the most riveting moments I've ever seen on film. It was like you'd go to dailies and you'd think, he'd go silent. And I knew that he was looking for the line, because 2 minutes later he'd say, line. But I'll bet you if you go and you watch every Christopher Walken movie and you find the really fantastic silent moments, I'll bet you half of them, I shouldn't say that, I don't know that for sure, but I think of that as a gift, that he could actually make silence and internal, you know, the wheels turning. It didn't matter that the wheels were turning to try to remember the line. It was like the wheels were turning.
Sometimes it's not so much what we put into a scene, but what we extract. And that's a lot of the work that something I learned from Abel over the course of was, let's make sure that we take out those things that might be a mistake for us. You know, when we go to a location like that in New York, you're going to find things that you don't want in the movie, rather than try to create so much to put in the movie. So we would go to a location like that and say, well, you know, those things or those articles or those dumpsters or these, that, those are the wrong color, this, that. So we would selectively say subtract rather than build in. And I mean, that's just a way to let the city be the city when it comes to some of those locations.
It's a pretty disturbingly detailed discussion that these two guys are having about the drugs and the money and, you know, the vendetta if, you know, so-and-so doesn't come through. And Chris, in one take, he just picked up this child, this like 3-year-old child who was part of the set, basically, and carried him, held him and his little teddy bear during the entire take. And of course this didn't match anything else, but he knew that, you know, you could cut away from the master before he picked up the kid, and then you'd go to his close-up, you know, or a medium shot when he picked up the kid. I mean, he definitely had an amazing mind, Chris did, for editing.
And I remember one time we were sitting around, he and this friend of mine from Italy, who was instrumental in getting the money for King of New York, and we were sitting at a restaurant having dinner, and Abel said, well, you have to excuse me, I have to go to the John. And he left and he never came back. And nobody said, so where did he go? What did he do? They just said, okay, he's not here, that's it. He went away. Now, did he frequently do that? No, I don't think so.
King of New York really introduces what would become Abel's master theme, which is the character searching for forgiveness. And I think it's an open question whether Christopher Walken's character, Frank White, actually finds forgiveness in that film. You know, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. It's very much an open question in all of the films that follow. And then, of course, he made Bad Lieutenant. It's one of the experiences in the cinema that has affected me most deeply.
Frankly, I saw the script and I thought, well, I want to do the picture, I want the production design credit, I want to work with Abel. I looked at the script and thought, oh my God, what are you going to do with this? And that's where I think the genius of a director comes out.
You know, at that time I was actually a DP. I was doing a lot of commercial stuff and was making a lot of money, but I was just bored. I got a phone call, 4 o'clock in the morning. Hello, yeah, Kenny. I said, Abe? Professionally for me, it was interesting in many ways. First of all, it was the first time that I sat down with a director and a lead, Keitel, and we decided exactly the philosophy of the movie, which was this detached camera that would sort of be non-judgmental and keep him in a medium close-up and just let him do whatever he did.
The beauty about Bad Lieutenant is it looks like a porno film, you know? There's something really sleazy about it, out of focus, and it's so funky looking, which is, of course, really works for the film, you know? It really does. I mean, the film is, you know, is incredible for that, you know?
Was it the Bad Lieutenant? Yes. I think we were on like 117th Street somewhere, some location. And we were shooting inside of an abandoned building, like a basement level. And I was coming around the corner from, I don't know, some bodega, getting something. And I see Abel, and he's about 75, 100 feet away from the crowd of the set. And this car is backing into a parking spot. And there's this like 4-year-old girl this car almost runs over. And Abel picks this girl up out of the curb, picks her up out of the way of the car that's backing into the spot, puts her on the sidewalk and says, "You all right, honey?" And he just keeps on walking. Doesn't say anything, doesn't blink, doesn't tell anybody, nothing. And I just looked at him like, and I was the only one who witnessed it, and I just looked at him like, that was just totally selfless. Totally selfless. And he says nothing.
And then what came next? I think, oh, then we did Oh, then we did body. The beautiful part about A Bad Lieutenant is we did that during the pre-production of Body Snatchers. So while they were doing, Nikki was doing a rewrite on Body Snatchers, we snuck this film in, and the deal was, I told Abel, I said, if we blow the big payday for this little crapper, you know, that wasn't going to pay us anything, I'll kill you. And in the background, I hear Nancy Ferrara saying, and I'll kill you too.
Christmas Day that year, I got a phone call from Abe, and he said, "You're not doing it." And I didn't quite understand it, but I realized it was the next film, which was Body Snatchers. And I was really shocked, and I was really pissed, and I felt kind of betrayed. But I understood what the studio wanted Boyan, who had shot a couple of California and a few other things, to do this film. And you know, I live with that decision, and I realized a lot of times that with a director, it's not personal.
Mary, it was nip and tuck. It was a nightmare. I
Yeah,
know you weren't, but I'm telling you, it was the scariest. Because here I am,
It was not
I'm thinking,
fun.
oh shit, I do. Well, you were there. It was you were finishing up Bad Lieutenant. Then we did Body Snatchers, the film that wasn't the film that Warner Brothers wanted. It was very contentious all the way through. All the way through. The studio was hovering, Hakanas Chinik, the Madonna film.
Dangerous Game.
Dangerous Snake Eyes. Harvey, Jimmy Russo, and Madonna in a room.
We ended up, going to California. Before the film got organized, I ended up finding out that I wasn't even making scale, doing a $12 million film where the star was getting $4 million. And, but it was a big experience for me. And, once again, Keitel was great. I thought Madonna was actually much better as an actor than I thought she'd ever be. We had a pretty good relationship. I enjoyed working with her. Russo and I, Jimmy, I've known Jimmy. Jimmy's actually in my graduate thesis film, so I've known Jimmy for 30 years.
At the screening of the film, when we ran it for Madonna, she said, this is a quote, "Tony, where was the movie I was in?"
First cut, she loved it because it was the Madonna film. And then when it was the final cut came, and of course Abe is contracted to Final Cut, so it was pretty much untouchable. It shifted from being a Madonna movie to the Keitel movie. And it didn't go anywhere. The New York Post said the front page was Madonna movie bombs.
So she was in tears, you know. She was in tears. She had this, like, her baseball cap on side where she's wearing the hip hop stuff, you know, this black with the white thread. I wanted to shut the fuck up, you know. And you know, she gets in your ear, you know. It's like a hot wire through your temple, you know. I mean, you know, and I'm in the movie, by the way, in case you guys don't know it. I'm very fine performance. I played the swinger.
Spanking scene.
Yeah, the sex scene, you know, that Jimmy Russo plays on the videotape. I am the only editor in the history of cinema who had to cut himself down to avoid an X rating, okay?
Since Snake Eyes, it has been this series of masterpieces. After Snake Eyes, it was The Addiction, and then The Funeral. And watching each of these films, you're aware that everything that Abel wants to express is there in every shot of the film. And that there's a wonderful example in The Addiction, when Lily Taylor's character she's just been attacked by the vampire, and she goes to a hospital, and there's a shot where she's talking to a police officer about the attack. And she walks away from the police officer and sits down next to a man who has been injured in some way. And Abel divides the shot in half, exactly. So on one half of the screen you have Lily Taylor, and the other half you have this man who has nothing to do with the plot, nothing to do with the narrative of The Addiction. Now that is at the heart of all of Abel's films. There is nobody superfluous in this world. No one character's problems are more important than anybody else's. There are no extras. Everyone is observed with absolute love and absolute tolerance. That as the morality of the films. You know, there are no villains in these films. And you can look at every shot of pretty much every film that he's made, and you'll see this same love for all human beings expressed constantly on screen.
I'd seen the script for The Funeral for about 5 years. Nicky St. John and I had many, we share the same. You know, Nicky's is just a great guy, intelligent guy, another tormented Catholic, a guy who's written 8 of Abe's films, and everyone has been condemned by the Catholic Church. He's a guy who goes to church every day. I admire his attempt at his personal, road to redemption, spirituality, whatever. So, from what I understand, this sort of was about. This was sort of based on Nicky's uncle, who lived up in Peekskill, and or uncles, and these guys were sort of radical gangsters, or at least the Vince Gallo character was a sort of a radical gangster. Well, maybe the elder brothers were not.
I think one thing that really has to be said is that the relationship between Abel Ferrara and Nicky Oliverio St. John was key to all of us working for all those years. I don't think that can be overlooked. I think that is critical to the whole setup. I mean, Nicky was, there was a point in time, and it was around Bad Lieutenant, I think, where Nicky, just for whatever reason, did not want to be involved in it. He didn't write the script. He just was off. And that was
Didn't approve of the subject
He didn't
matter.
approve of the subject matter. And that was where the divide began, as far as I could see. And then he came back on board after that, which was, I guess,
Body Snatchers.
And then The Funeral was really Nicky's.
That was a script that had been around for a while.
Yeah, it had been around for a
Just
while.
like
That was-
King of New York, that
was
script
his
was
beat.
the,
That's
remember,
right.
that was the Frank White
That's exactly
project,
right.
you know?
And then that falling out, I think, was the beginning of the whole team and the whole band kind of splitting up. I mean, I think it was really critical. That was like the Mick and Keith of the group, And, I don't know what the specifics of that were. I mean, they went back so far, but that was it.
I had nothing to do with The Funeral, but then that was like a 2-year hiatus I took from Abel while I got my strength back, and then we did Blackout, and Abel Ferrara's Blackout. That should have been titled that, like Mickey Spillane's Girl Hunters, Abel Ferrara's Blackout.
We only had one licensed song in the Blackout, a U2 song called Miami, which is in twice. Everything else is original. All of the songs were written especially for this picture. We brought in a hip-hop, rap artist for one serious rap song that Schooley did, and he did together. And I mean, it was just a hybrid of very interesting combinations of special guests. When you copyright music in Italy, they still require you to give the lyric sheets and the music written out, the lead sheets. And whereas here you can give an audio cassette or CD, and that's perfectly acceptable. Well, I don't know how much time you spent listening to the music in the movie, to the Blackout, but it's sexually explicit lyrics. God bless them. They loved the music in the film and record, and were incredibly supportive, and thrilled that the film was selected as part of the 50th anniversary Cannes Film Festival. And so him acknowledging me in such a sensitive and sincere way at Cannes after I had worked so hard for so many months was very special to me, and I really appreciated it.
Another one of his very greatest films, Nero's Hotel. And I'm furious with the way that this film has been so casually misunderstood by most commentators. I can't imagine how Abel feels. I know it upsets him, the way that film has been so casually dismissed. Frankly, I don't know how he lives with it.
The film was quite unsuccessful, I thought, and Abel I don't think his head was in it quite quite frankly. I'm sorry to say, but, you know, it's a personality thing, and I walked off the film. But, you know, obviously, my filmography with Abel is the most important thing in my career. And I've done a lot of this stuff, you know, but as far as I'm concerned, the only stuff worth mentioning is the stuff I did with Abel. I love it. It's my total favorite. If I die right now, I'll know that forever good work will exist. I got to do stuff. I got to experiment on film. I got to, because my idea of editing is rewriting, filmic language. And Abel was fully prepared to let me do anything I wanted to go to that extreme. He's a bit of an anarchist. I'm a bit of an anarchist. Anything goes. Destroy the establishment. Destroy all monsters. Fuck Hollywood. We're anti-Hollywood. And that's what I like. I'll tell you what it is. The best film that we could have made is with in Bad Lieutenant we almost succeeded. When the audience comes out of that theater, they're so incensed they burn the theater down. That would have been the ideal, and I think we almost made it with Bad Lieutenant, where they were so incensed they went berserk.
With Abe, usually I get this. I always make sure that I'm involved in a post. He is most definitely, very, very, very concerned that I'll be there to finish it. And I'll go through a couple of answer prints, but he likes the films darker and darker and darker. On our Xmas, despite all this, we wanted to do the silver retention, the skip bleach process, which I was concerned because I was afraid that the whole that they would not, because it's done in the printing process, that once we did a negative pickup, the Europeans that we sold to would not do the more expensive process. So I just lit it with virtually no contrast. With no fill light.
The only thing I really did on that one was to rescue the production, and I think that's what I was called in to do, from a terrifying contractual dispute between the principals involved in this. And I don't want to particularly go on with it because my job there was to not do anything other than see to it that everybody finally agreed that the picture would be made. Unless that happened, the picture would have never been made. There were too many disputes amongst the creative and business people. Finally, that was resolved and the picture was made.
That's what happens. Unfortunately, that's Abel's personal curse, is that he finds people that are not real strong in the honesty department when it comes to distributing films.
I've always been fascinated by Abel Ferrara's films, and I have been writing a book about them for the last 5 years. During the course of those 5 years, people who I've told about this book often ask me what it is that interests me about Abel Ferrara's work. And I could never answer that question. I was always very embarrassed by my inability to answer that question, until finally I realized that that was the answer to the question, that these films were too complex to be summed up in any simple statement, that they were about people who could not be summed up. They refused to limit their characters in any way. There were never any adequate psychological explanations for people. There were never any adequate sociological explanations. These people are always too complex for any reductive formula that the films might impose on them. And there's a constant sense of life breaking out of the edges of the frame.
So far as the people that I have worked with or worked for, I think Abel is the most interesting, the most human, the one with the best sense of humor, the most unpredictable, and perhaps, in a sense, the weakest.
You know, I want everyone to get their wallets out. You know, I'm not doing this unless I get some of the fucking cash shit. You know what I'm saying, man?
There was just not a real lot of separation between his life and his films, in a way. I'm not saying that, you know, he went home to a, you know, a nightclub. I don't know what he went home to, but I just felt that there was something real about him and real about his relationship to what he was shooting.
Someone recently, just a couple months ago, said, "So when's the last time you worked with Abel?" And I said, "The funeral was what was the last picture, but it started in 1981, and that was a good 16-year run."
Yeah,
and a very
right.
well-known producer in Hollywood said to me, "Well, that's a career in itself."
That's right.
And that kind of perspective you don't always focus on, because, you know, we made a lot of pictures and they were also exhausting.
Oh yeah, he had his hands in his pockets a lot. He'd wear these blazers. Let's see if I can I'm not doing it fast enough.
He can be very irascible and grumpy.
Okay, well, how much money do you have on you right now? Yeah. Forget about checks.
And then he can be very thoughtful.
Yeah, it's great, but, you know, am I going to see any money out of this? You know what I'm saying? Come on, you guys must have a few bucks on you.
Hey, what do you say? What do you say? That's it.
Poison ivy.